Okay, welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. I just realized I had started the entire stream without sound on. And that would be a problem. Unless you're good at reading lips. And no one was able to tell me that because the stream wasn't working for everybody. Okay, so last time, we're going to start this over. We're 6 minutes late now, but it'll be alright. Last time, we left off at Titus verse 10. Titus 1 verse 10. And we were talking about the qualifications of an elder. We were talking about elder and also bishop. Or maybe elders and bishops are the same thing. Maybe they're interchangeable. Certainly, if you're going to have a bishop, they're going to be taken from among elders. It's definitely someone could be an elder without being a bishop. But on the other hand, the role of the elder is oversight. And that's what it means to be a bishop. So, he continues in verse 10, and he says, "For there are many unruly and vain talkers and deceivers, especially they of the circumcision, whose mouths must be stopped, who subvert whole houses, teaching things which they ought not for filthy lucre's sake." And we'll hold off on the next verse. And Paul had a special conflict with the Jews, and for two reasons. Because of his history, he was a Pharisee of the Pharisees and was extremely zealous of the traditions of the Jews. And when he was struck down on the road to Damascus, and the Lord, basically changed his entire, opened his eyes to the truth. He said, Paul says, "Who are you?" He says, "I am Jesus whom thou persecutest." And so Paul became the biggest and strongest proponent of the gospel. And he understood things about the gospel in some ways faster than the apostles who had been apostles before him. You definitely get that feeling. Because initially, the other apostles thought it was only to the Jews. And the reason I'm talking about the Jews, if you don't understand, is because he says there are many unruly and vain talkers and deceivers, especially those of the circumcision. Circumcision is a euphemism he uses for the Jews. And a lot of times people think like the Bible is anti-Semitic. It's not that. It's not about their race. It is very clearly about... He makes it about the circumcision. They of the circumcision. He chooses that because that is the reason that is used is because it's a stand-in for their adherence to the law. For their also there were issues of them attempting to get Gentiles or trying to convince Gentiles that they had to be circumcised, that they had to follow the law of Moses before they could become Christians. And to get them to adhere to the Sabbath day. You still have people to this day who, for one reason, or I should say over one matter or another, want you to adhere to the law. There are people who are very adamant about Sabbath keeping. And they become especially obsessed about Saturday. You got to do it on Saturday. And then there are the people who become especially obsessed about what you eat and what you drink, and who get obsessed about the clothing you wear. And and these are all things that are important and actually do fall into some sort of. We have to think about them. We don't want to be legalistic about food and drink, at least according to the Old Covenant. But food and drink can be things that lead us down a path to sin, just as the clothes we wear can. We can array ourselves in a way that becomes sinful. I'm not going to go deep into that because I want to stick with this right here. So, unruly and vain talkers. I can't resist. Let's see what we got as far as unruly and vain talkers. Unruly obviously means can't be ruled. Not subject to rule. Vain talkers is the one I really metalogos, talking idly. Well, that's pretty perfect. Because I don't know if you've ever heard of, I don't know how it relates because I'm not a Greek scholar. I was going to compare metalogos to the idea of metaphysics, because the physics of things that are not substantial. But I know meta is actually a prefix, like a preposition, a prepositional prefix. A prepositional prefix is like in English we have, like in. Like you take consequential and you add in to it and it becomes inconsequential. And it is also a preposition, though I don't think in that context it is at all functional as a preposition. And I don't know. So don't take that for too much. But the idea of it's idle, insubstantial talk. And deceivers. Now he's saying that their talk is unsubstantial, but they can certainly seem to be substantial. I've never heard a legalist who does not wrap himself around the thought that what they have to say is the most important thing in the world. Because, and it's always interesting to me to get to the bottom of it, like saying, well, does my soul depend on me keeping the Sabbath? Because they say you got to keep the Sabbath. Okay, I'm like, well, if I don't keep the Sabbath, does that mean I can't be saved? And for the most part, people are sort of like, well, no, but you should. Or yes, but you should. Or no, it can't be. Yeah. No, but you should. And then I had one person told me, like, they stuck to their guns and they said, yeah, you must keep the Sabbath or you can't be saved. They decided that was where they stood. That's full legalism. Except you do this, you can't be saved. And we are saved by grace through faith, not of yourself. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. I should probably make sure to quote that part. Because our salvation is not, it does not come from our works, anything we've done or will do. Though our salvation is full of works, they're not done. They're done as a consequence of God's grace and mercy, and not as they're not a prerequisite that we have to put forward in order to obtain God's grace and mercy. That's the wrong idea. And if you say you must do this to be saved, and if you don't, then you're not, and you won't be, well, then that's a work that is basically a prerequisite. And prerequisite works are not part of the gospel. Because the gospel is about forgiving our sins and allowing us to come to God without having to, without having this burden of the law. Though the righteousness which God requires of us in Christ actually exceeds the righteousness of the law. That's why Jesus said, that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees. You shall in no way enter into the kingdom of heaven. You have to be more righteous than they are. And they were pretty righteous, as far as in the outward sense. As far as the letter of the law, they kept the commandments. Now, they were very not nice people. But, they believed, thou shalt not commit murder. But you can hate everybody and it's no problem. You can say all kinds of things to people. You can sort of like, you could do things that sort of led to someone's murder, but as long as you didn't murder him yourself, your hands were clean. You can see that in the murder of Jesus. They they want to get Pilate to do it. Even Pilate, knowing their mindset, washed his hands. But it's about this mentality of legalism. Now, it's not just Jews who don't believe it was actually, for Paul, a lot of the problem was not the Jews who didn't believe in Jesus, but Jews who believed in Jesus and attempted to convert the Gentiles to Judaism as a part of becoming a Christian. And you can see how they'd make that mistake, but it's sort of like it is against faith. And it still goes on to this day. There's what do they call them? I mention it all the time. But there is a Hebrew roots movement where they actually go to the depths of putting like tassels on their garments and stuff, and they talk and talk and talk, and they're not ruled properly. They're not allowing the gospel of Jesus Christ to rule them. I mean, like in a sense, like Paul called it the weak and beggarly elements. Going back to the law to establish righteousness and to bring about salvation is antithetical to Christianity. That's not how it works. Christianity is about achieving the same and actually an exceptional righteousness over that which the law could provide. But one does that through faith and through the Spirit of Christ being active in you and leading and guiding you to all true, not just true thoughts and doctrines, but true behaviors, meaning the thing you need to do when you're confronted with a particular situation. I mean, there's like, what should I do here? I'm confronted with a situation. What should I do? Well, there's a true answer. As far as the truth that would be righteous. What is the righteous thing to do here? Let's say I say, well, A. A is false, wrong, not true. B. No, B is false, not C is what you should do. Well, the Holy Spirit guides us to know what to do. And to a greater and lesser extent, if we will hear Him. And His voice is quiet, but it's like you kind of know. It's because a lot of times we want to do we have a will to do things that are contrary to the truth. That is our human nature. And then the Spirit, we know what the truth is. We know what we should do. And if we don't, He can teach us. So, and how do we get that? Well, we got to pray. We got to ask. Ask and it shall be given you. Seek and you shall find. So, the world is full of deceivers, vain talkers, and unruly. I guess I just want to go on and on about that. I always like when Paul says stuff like this, whose mouths must be stopped. And take that as a figure of speech. You'd like to shut them up, And there's plenty of people in this world that I'd love to shut up. There's plenty of preachers on TV that I wish would go off the air. Right? Sometimes I get criticized for picking on one particular teacher, the one that was my teacher. But I never make any bones about it. I don't know. And there's some guys I'll say nice things about, but I can't say that I've really spent much time watching them. I just, you spend enough time digging around in the garbage, you realize, this is not where I should be getting my dinner. So they subvert whole houses. To the action of one deceitful man in a position of power, one person who has false doctrines, hearts, can corrupt the whole house. And he means the house of God. He means a collective assembly of believers. They can be so destructive in that realm that it makes it very important to make sure you don't allow that to happen. And it happens. And it's all right. As far as there's corruption in the body of believers, there always is. There must needs be false prophets among you, so that they which are approved might be made manifest. There is always going to be opposition. That's why God created Satan, is because there must be opposition. It's like for us to be formed properly. There has to be opposition. There has to be struggle. I think it was some sort of butterfly or something, like that they need to struggle out of their cocoon, because the struggling out, and it looked like, it's like, gee, it's like if I was wrapped up like that, I think I'd go insane from claustrophobia. But the action of struggling out forces fluid into their wings, and it allows them to become stiffened and properly formed. And like if you go in with a razor and like, I'll help him out, he'll come out with shriveled wings and they'll never fly. And I believe that's a true thing. I remember either reading, seeing a long time ago. They subvert whole houses. But I mean, certainly know it's true of us that we need to struggle. It's part of the thing. It is given you on the behalf of Christ not only to believe on him, but to suffer for his sake. That's the last verse of Philippians chapter 1. It is given us on behalf of Christ not just to believe. Notice it is given to us to believe. It is given. Faith is a gift. You can't have faith if he doesn't send a preacher, and God doesn't send, certainly in the first century, he didn't send preachers to everybody. So where was his grace? It was on those who heard the preaching, and that's where his grace was. And it has spread out. Their voice has gone into all the world. But, we need that grace so we can have faith to believe in him. I lost my train of thought. Oh well. Who subvert whole houses, teaching things which they ought not for filthy lucre's sake. Filthy lucre. Money. And this is a cliche. It's a cliche. All the preachers, they want money. And, there is money in it. The thing is, it started off, the whole bishop thing started off as basically like, we have widows in the church, and what's the right thing to do? And a widow was not just a woman whose husband had died and left her, millions of dollars. That's not a widow. Not a widow indeed, as they said. A widow indeed is one who is destitute, meaning she has no support. She has no family, she's really hard up. And you think about it, in the old times, women were completely dependent on their husbands for their livelihood. Their job was to keep the house and raise the children. And then the children are raised, and the husband passes away. And often, then the children, part of honoring your father and your mother is when they're old, if they need your help, you should give them assistance. And but that's not always done. And some, through circumstances, children can die before their parents. And a woman who had no real marketable skills other than I'm a mother and homemaker would find herself at 50 or 60 with no prospects, no income, and she was in deep trouble. Her husband had gone, and maybe he had been just a laborer who was surviving day to day. And so the church thought, these are widows, these are people who are destitute and not able to support themselves. We should let's take a collection, because everyone's got a little money. Other than people, especially, we'll go to that in a second. So they take a collection, and then they're like, well, we need someone to the apostles didn't want to be bothered with this whole, they would go right to the apostles and say, here's the money, distribute. And then they were starting to get into all this administrative stuff, and they really wanted to just preach the gospel. They want to get involved in all this distribution stuff. As Paul also said, you can't muzzle the ox that treads the corn, which is an idiom or an analogy, essentially. I think it's an idiom because it's a word picture. But the idea is you have an ox, he's treading the corn. Let him eat a little corn while he's doing it. He's working at the job. You can't starve the animal that is supposed to be doing the labor. And if there's if there's corn readily available, they that work of the gospel must need live of the gospel, it's been said. Because if you're busy in the things of God, doing a full-time ministry, then it certainly makes sense that you need some support. Because you can't, when I get done here, I got to go to work, right? But if you are in it full-time, you're basically, how are you going to support yourself? Well, if you're serving a bunch of people, they're not all going to be destitute and widows. There's going to be somewhat of an abundance. And God can bless people so that they can help. And that's good. In America, you think about it, even the poorest of us could probably give something small to something important. In fact, some of the poorest states, I heard, have some of the highest rates of charitable giving. But maybe that's because they have so many poor among them. I don't know. I don't know if that necessarily means the poor are giving. But, like you see everybody, you see the Salvation Army ringer and you throw in some change. There's not, people have spare change. It's America. We're all pretty, compared to the rest of the world, even the poorest people have way more in terms of food and just even if you're homeless. I mean, it's like you have access to so much more if you're able to avail yourself of it. I mean, obviously, some people, because of mental illness and stuff, it's like they come down to really bad situations, or because of drug use, which is like an illness anyways. Heroin addiction is big, at least right now. So we don't want to corrupt this charitable giving into being, the reason for which we're doing ministry. Passion for the ministry should come first. Someone should be passionate about it. It's kind of like, I always think like, well, I was going to talk about something political, not a political topic, but like, I always feel like there are some people who almost should be drafted into politics. Like, they don't want to do it, and that's exactly why they ought to be doing it, because they're the right people. They're the right people. They should be in charge. You should be in charge. And then people should make you do it, whether you want to or not. So, let's move on. One of themselves, even a prophet of their own, said, the Cretans are always liars, or alway liars. That sounds like bad English now. Alway liars, probably fine in the King James time. Evil beasts, slow bellies. This witness is true, wherefore rebuke them sharply, that they may be sound in the faith. Yeah, let's go to the next verse too. Not giving heed to Jewish fables and commandments of men that turn from the truth. And we better stop there. Oh, we're already at 27. Wow. It's a short study. Usually when I would study something like this, I would just sit with a microphone and go on for 2 hours. And I think every time I go over a book again, it is a little longer each time. I never get tired of talking about it, so I don't really care how long it takes us to get through anything. I'm going to be here every morning anyway, so. One of themselves, even a prophet of their own, of these false prophets, these unruly men, not all of the circumcision. They don't have to be of the circumcision. Some people will take on the veneer of sincere and true Christianity just to make money. It is a decent job, I mean, you can be a pretty lackluster pastor and make money. I mean, you can just preach on Sunday. I mean, many pastors do much more than that, and they are often compensated for it. Because they do counseling, they have a lot more activity during the week. It's not just a Sunday thing. But you can get away with just doing your Sunday preaching and make at least enough to survive. In a small church. And, I'm sure there's more to it than that. There's got to be some administrative role. But then there's the elders, who are usually volunteers. So I don't know a lot about church government, I should say, on that score. I've been places and seen meetings and stuff like that. And then you see these excessive ministries where it's like they're really rich, and you think, okay, so at some point they were part of a church and it just went off the rails. Or they just jumped off the rails themselves and built up their own empire apart from the normal way things are done in a church. I don't know. So this is where we get the idea of Cretans. The idea of that calling someone a Cretan is an insult comes from here. And it sounds kind of weird, you think about it. He says, one of these people said, they have nothing, their mouths should be shut. You gotta say why he's saying this. Their mouths must be stopped. They subvert everything, right? And then they say this. This is something that comes out of their mouth about the Cretans. He said, the Cretans are always liars, evil beasts, slow bellies. So today in the modern world we say, he's stereotyping them. Well, the other people are stereotyping them. The people he's talking against, they stereotype the Cretans and say this about them. There's a blanket condemnation. The thing is, this is not, stereotypes all have some sort of grounding in something true. I mean, how many times I can, I don't like to get into that stuff, honestly, about racial stereotypes. But certainly, you can go to a town and get a sense of what the town is like. Say, people in this town are all nepotistic. I mean, there's a strong element of nepotism running through this town. Because I heard there was a town near where I live where it was like, that was the rap. That basically, if your children were not of a certain family in school, you'd have trouble, right? I mean, meaning that you won't make the team. You will not get to play on the basketball team. You will not get to bat on the baseball team. You're not going to be put forward in, your grades are going to suffer, that kind of stuff. Like, because the town was so, basically, so controlled by the people who had been there for so many years. But does that mean everyone in that town is like that? Of course not. Of course not. But enough bad apples in a barrel, you begin to think this barrel is just full of nothing but bad apples. It's not nothing but it's like you want to sort through all the rotten apples to find the 5 or 6 sound ones. I mean, like, if you were at the store and you saw a bag and it was half filled with rotten apples, are you going to buy the whole bag? But you're going to think that bag's full of rotten apples. How many does it take for you to start assessing the whole thing as being full of rotten apples? And I use my own race. Like, sometimes people say, like, well, white people this or white people that, right? And it's a stereotype as much as any other stereotype. It's grounded in some sort of truth because it's based on people's judgment. They see people act in a certain way, and so it's true on something, but of course it's not true of everybody. Now, what Paul is saying is these stereotypes are true, and for what they're worth. And he's saying, so rebuke them sharply. Rebuke the Cretans that they may be sound in the faith. See, he's saying don't give them cause. Don't give them anything to pick on. He's saying you can't allow people to define you like that. You've got to take steps to alter their perception. If that's the perception that you're always that you're liars and evil beasts, and he's probably talking about the Cretan Christians, not just the Cretan people living on the island of Crete. By the way, that's what it means to be a Cretan. They probably go out there and say, so he's saying, rebuke the Cretans so that they can be sound in the faith. I want to look at these words real quick about. I'm guessing evil beast is probably exactly, it's 2 words, a wild beast and evil. And slow or idle bellies. Okay, so it's translated precisely from Greek. Liars, beasts with slow bellies. What are slow bellies? I've got a slow belly, literally. It's like a medical condition. And what does that mean? Well, I guess what it means is it's probably a comment on their intellect. They can't. They when you give them some information, and it takes them forever to digest it. They can't process it, so they eat, and then it's like they're instantly full. Because that's what it's like. They're slow. You get full. Like say I'm talking. It's like, and you're like, oh, hold on, I just can't take this all in. Just give me. I gotta sort this out. I gotta think about this. And so I'm not able to. At least this is my take on what this idiom possibly means. That's how you kind of have to approach it when he uses something like that. Does it mean I believe in a literal interpretation of the Bible. It means that they thought that they literally had a medical condition that caused their digestion to be slow. It's interesting because they say there's places where they talk about people where it says their God is their belly, whose glory is their shame. And I gotta think that the normal thought of a belly is like if your God is your belly, it's pretty obvious. It means feeding yourself, taking in pleasures, right? That's what your God is your belly implies. That's what you serve either your stomach, and not just like eating, but like consumption. And here he's saying they're slow to consume. And so it's probably referring to something more intellectual. You know. But they're evil animals. They're animals. And that's the kind of metaphor that's used all the time to describe people of different stripes. It's like because some people act more like animals than like humans when they start, departing from civilized behavior. Rebuke them sharply that they may be sound in the faith. We want to be sound in the faith. Paul talked about sound doctrine, sound faith. Sound is kind of a funny word because it means audio, right? Hearing things, but in English. But what does he? It also means the idea that something is solid and sound and well-founded. And also it can mean like healthy. And that's what I guess it's in Greek. I'm not going to try to pronounce the word. This is way too difficult. I looked at it. Hugi, I can't pronounce it. Hugi, whatever. I'm not looking at it anymore. It's a H and a lot of E's, O's, and U's. So, rebuke them sharply that they may be sound in the faith. And then the last one, this verse, we're going to pick it up next time. Or we'll see, maybe we won't have questions. But I need to talk about that a little more. That's going to take some time. Let's see where we're at on questions. We've gone the first half hour, and we started late because of that technical difficulty. Okay. Let's see, we got a question. And just to, here we go. If you have a question, you can send your questions to questions@oraclesofgod.org. And I will get the question and read it here and try to answer. And so there is that. In fact, okay, the inbox is empty. I was going to say I haven't checked it yet, but I'm like, I can't say that again. I can't say. So we have questions here. One on the chat. Sorry. There we go. On the chat, we have a question from Mrs. Stringini. And she says, you mentioned Sabbath days at the beginning of the study. Do you keep a certain day? Well, no. That's easy. No, yeah. I do not keep a certain day. And it wouldn't even work for me because of my schedule in life to keep a day because, So, I suppose someone said, well, alter your life. Shouldn't the gospel alter our lives? Sure. But the Sabbath is not the gospel. And in fact, the funny thing is that always gets me about the Sabbath keeping is that the Sabbath is like one of the named things that comes up several times in the New Testament. Like Jesus was walking through the corn with his disciples on the Sabbath day, right? And they were picking corn and eating it. And I can show you from the law, and I've done this in studies. In fact, I did a study on oraclesofgod.org. Let's just throw that little card up. oraclesofgod.org. For more study songs and more, I gotta change that. For more study songs and more. For more, visit oraclesofgod.org. That's funny. For more studies and more. Well, it is more, I should say, but that's bad writing on my part. I should be for additional studies, songs and more. There you go. So I have a study there. You can go to the doctrine page, and I don't remember the number of the study. I should, but it's not hard to find. You go to studies page. You go on the left-hand side. There's a column that has all the single subject studies I've done, and there's one called "How Christ Abolished the Commandments." And I was thinking about doing a follow-up to that because I got blowback from people. Because people hate it when you say he abolished the 10 Commandments and all the commandments of the Old Testament. Because they don't understand that they're only abolished under the new covenant. I mean, you have to believe in him. You have to be under the blood of Christ. And then the Old Testament commandments have no more power. Or there's no reason to follow them because You are following God directly now. You have access to a greater righteousness now. You don't have to go back to those things. And the Sabbath is one of the things that is mentioned specifically. In the Old Testament, like I said in that study, I cover how that in the Old Testament they were walking, there was the whole incident of the manna. When they were in the wilderness for 40 years, God fed them with manna. And one of the rules was on the Sabbath, on the day before the Sabbath, you go out and you gather double manna for the Sabbath day. Because on the Sabbath day, there would be no manna. Well, when people even went out to look for manna, they didn't actually pick it up. It was seen as a violation of the Sabbath day. And certainly Jesus' disciples picking corn and eating it as they went on the Sabbath was looked upon rightly as even more a violation of the Sabbath. I mean, if it was a violation to just look for manna, it was certainly a violation to pick corn. And Jesus was saying that in a sense, he had the right to do this because he was the Messiah, and his disciples had the right to do it because they were his disciples. And he was there to inspire a greater righteousness than the law allowed. The law set these very strict rules. Like sort of like this minimum, like just do this and I'll bless you. You know, like it's not too hard. Just don't on this day. Just rest on this day. No, just don't do nothing. All right, because it's a lot harder to tell somebody, you know, to explain how to rest in God every day and moment of your life. But through the Holy Spirit, we have that capability, and so the rest of the Sabbath required is one of the things that passed away in the law. It doesn't mean we don't have to rest, though. I mean, I keep the Sabbath. I do. I think so. It says, Paul, the one man honoreth one day above another, and other men honor, and another man honors every day alike. You can honor every day. Obviously, you can't honor it the same way that they honor the Sabbath by not working. But by entering into his rest, you can enter into a spiritual Sabbath. And that is certainly the New Testament teaching. You know, Christ our Sabbath, he is called by the apostle. So he was Christ our Sabbath. We can enter into rest with him no matter what we happen to be doing. And so the old commandment of like you had to carnally be inactive for a whole day. And that's the thing that bugs me. A lot of these Sabbath keepers don't really keep it the way they did in the Old Testament. They afford all kinds of allowances for themselves, for leniency, for breaking the Sabbath, for not following it to the letter, you know, because we have some... Look at either you're following the law or you're not. Either you're going to keep it to the letter or you're not. And if you're not, then you're just not. You're not. If you're not keeping it to the letter, you are not keeping it. If you're going by the law, because the law is by the letter. The letter kills, but the Spirit makes alive. Oh, let's see. Oh, there's another question. Let's see what we got here. Sometimes I think there we go. Let's see if this works right. Questions and answers. Okay. Looking good. Why doesn't it refresh? Oh, I have to actually bring this window up and that'll refresh it. Okay. Learning as I go. It'd be lovely to have an engineer here to actually run this whole thing, but that's me. And it's fun. What does it mean to rebuke sharply in the last verse? Well, funny you should ask. A sharp rebuke is basically, you know, telling them without any equivocation, without any, you know, you can rebuke someone softly, basically saying like, look at, you know, you need to stop that. You know, you just it has to do with, I suppose, your manner and also the choice of words and also the severity of judgment that you take. Because here's the thing, it's like, there's a judgment. You know, you're not supposed to judge as a Christian. We don't judge. But we judge everything. We do. There's always judgment. And we judge not men's souls. What we do is we judge the activity. We know that lying is wrong. I don't have to judge that. You know what I'm saying? But if someone is lying all the time, right, they have to be rebuked, and the rebuke doesn't come in the form of just like, hey, could you cut out all the lying? It's going to be more like, this is conduct unbecoming a Christian. You can't be doing this. You have to be right. And a sharp rebuke it's more about, I think it's a matter of conscience in a sense. It's like you have to judge for yourself how far to go in your rebuke. You don't want to go so far that you crush someone necessarily, unless your aim is to literally kick them out of the church because of transgressions, or because of maybe they're like these people he's talking about who will come in. They're unruly and vain talkers of the circumcision, or not, whatever. They're coming into the church and saying like, hey, everybody's got to keep the Sabbath. We need to change things. And they're just disrupting things and causing divisions in the church and causing people to doubt their salvation or doubt their faith. And they're causing all kinds of rifts and disturbances. That person needs to be removed. And that goes beyond a sharp rebuke. Their mouths have to be stopped. But now when he's talking about the Cretans, they've got problems, but he's saying they need a sharp rebuke, which means they need to be, made to understand they've got work to do, and they've got to get it together. And I guess I've definitely, as a father, I know how to give a sharp rebuke. And certainly I've given my share, as anyone who knows me personally knows. I can be very sharp, and it's sharp. You think about the idea of sharpness, right? It puts a very fine point on things, right? A soft rebuke, when things are sharp, they've been honed down to a very fine edge. That means there's a very clear definition of what is the matter. A sharp rebuke is going to be have a high degree of clarity about what's wrong. You have a high degree of trying to motivate them through pressure. There's going to be pressure, at least verbal pressure. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm going to use words that are going to put pressure on them to get their act together. And it doesn't mean it has to be like just cruel, though. You know what I'm saying? Like a sharp rebuke is sharp, but it is not meant, it's meant to rebuke, not to crush. I mean, a lot of times people, they don't, you have to consider the other person like you're rebuking. The point, remember what it said. Let's go back to the study page here real quick. Remember what it said about this. Rebuke them sharply, that they may be sound in the faith. Right? That is an important part of that injunction. Is your purpose ultimately is to make them sound in the faith, not that they may give up the faith. Or rebuke them sharply that they may crawl into a hole or into a rock. No, we want to rebuke them sharply so that they may be sound, so that they could be healthy. They could have a healthy Christian walk. So that's what we want to accomplish by our rebukes. We want to accomplish health to their Christian life. We want to, it should in some way. I don't know if you're gonna put it's good when you deliver a rebuke to have a plan and not just start off like, I'm just going to rebuke this person. Have a plan, because the point is, if you're rebuking another believer, is to help them. Everything we're doing for one another should be taken in the form of exhortation and encouragement. And a rebuke is basically saying you're doing something wrong and you need to stop. And it doesn't. And a lot of times, a sharp rebuke can just be very precise. Meaning precision of language, being very direct in your speech, not beating around the bush. Okay, just get right to the point. And but you also have to have the plan to say, okay, well, I'm going to rebuke them, but what do I want to do? I want to rebuke the evil and I want to encourage the good. So you should not neglect to combine those things. It is good to, when you rebuke someone, you also encourage them at the same time, so that they don't lose heart. So they don't become. You don't want to destroy your brother just because. And why are you rebuking them? I mean, there's no reason. We shouldn't be rebuking people just to gratify ourselves. Some people just love to make other people feel bad, and that's not the way we should behave. So I'm going to, unless there's another question here, I'm going to go on. Let's see. I got 10 minutes left. Really, I've got more like 14, 15 minutes left because I started 6 minutes late because of the technical issue. So he says, not giving heed to Jewish fables and commandments of men that turn from the truth. I think that's very important. The idea of Jewish fables. Some people would say, well, that's, again, it's not against them, it's against the fables. And I always think it's interesting that, I was, as a young man, I was taken in, I didn't know much about the Bible, I really wanted to learn, and I found a guy who was teaching line by line Bible studies with the text right in the bottom, just like that. And and I've never done it like this before, but it's definitely strange to me in a sense to be doing it this way. And I make no bones about it that that's where I got the idea from, because it's powerful to have the word explained right in front of your eyes. I don't want to make it. I kind of like the audio in a sense, but I think this in some ways is better because you can see it. But a lot of the core doctrines that I was taught were stuff that I didn't realize till much later that actually came from, is it the Kabbalah? I think it was the Kabbalah. A lot of the stuff about the serpent, the guy had an idea that the serpent was actually the father of Cain, and that the eating the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was actually some sort of sexual act, really bizarre kind of teaching, but he had a way of selling you on it, and I certainly got sold through his confidence tactics and the fact that I knew nothing and he seemed to know everything. We're very vulnerable when we are like that. So he takes advantage of our ignorance, or he did. He's dead now. And these teachings are actually come from Jewish mysticism. And if they were put into books, in the centuries after Christ, that means they were already in circulation, at least as oral traditions in the time of Christ. There probably already had been, they had been extant even at that time. There are a lot of weird stories that you can derive from the Bible, or that are taught as being like sort of hidden beneath the surface. If I just look into the text, I peel away I can get between the lines. Let's see if we can get between the lines and see the secret hidden meaning. What does this mean? Oh, it's fun to be able to do that. So, they think that like the words that are right there are not enough. They have to get into peeling apart it, and I look into the words to analyze what is being said, but they look into the words to find hidden meanings. And I'm not referring to Jews. I mean like some teachers. And most of the time now, there's such a split between Jews and Christians, though there are millions of Jewish Christians, and they're usually not of the circumcision, as far as like trying to get people to be circumcised and all that. I mean, you can be a Jew and be a Christian. It's just that a Gentile doesn't have to become a Jew to become a Christian. You know what I mean? You can be a Jew and be circumcised, and you're a Christian. It doesn't mean like, like you can even honor the Sabbath day. I don't honor a day, but it's like if someone feels that that's what they want to do, of course you can. But just don't try to require it of me. That's difficult for some people. And I've talked about that before. I'm not going to digress on that now because we're almost at the end here. Well, we got 10 minutes left, actually. So, Jewish fables and commandments of men that turn from the truth. And, that's the thing, is that what he's saying is by the time you understand that the law of God, people would say, well, he's not talking about the law of God, is he? Well, in that, Christ's sacrifice freed us from the law. and that he fulfilled all, and the law has passed away, as far as being the motivational force for us to be righteous. We're not righteous because we're following the law. We are righteous because we are following Jesus. We have a living law in a man, Christ. That's what I don't get, is they don't understand. So we're not followers of the law. We are followers of Jesus. That is who we follow. He is the source of our righteousness of the law. There's the law of Christ, but it's not the law of Moses. And what happens is the law that was given by God, when God says it has passed away, it becomes the commandments of men. If someone comes back and says, well, no, you still got to do all this. Now it's not the commandment of God, because God has not commanded us to continue in it. It becomes the commandments of men. You must be circumcised in order to be saved. That's a commandment of men. But it was a perpetual covenant for Abraham and his offspring. Yeah, but I'm not. I am a child of Abraham, aren't I? Because through Jesus, it says, those who are of faith are the children of Abraham. And it's true, because Abraham had, he only had Isaac. Well, he had Isaac, and then he had Ishmael. And Ishmael was not the heir. Isaac was. And Isaac had two sons, Jacob and Esau. And Esau was not the heir. It was Jacob. So, the children of God are those who are the children of faith. And not because legally Esau was in fact, Esau was the firstborn. He had legal right to inherit. And God himself did not did not honor that legal right. He rejected Esau. He hated Esau. So it says. I'm going to check one more time for a question. Okay, that's fine. I don't think I'm going to check it again. Yeah, I want to leave the other verses for it. I've got time, though. So, giving heed to Jewish fables that turn from the truth and commandments of men. We are followers of Jesus, and if we go back to the weak and beggarly elements of the law, we're giving heed to commandments of men. If we turn to fables, like I said, and it's not just Arnold Murray, my former teacher. There are plenty of people out there trying to sell you on this serpent seed doctrine. And I have a tape called The Seed of the Serpent. Not tape. What am I talking about? Did I just expose? Can you tell I was born in 1973? Yeah. I still talk about tapes. And I've got a big thing of tapes out in my garage. All of my old Bible studies from ages ago. And I got a lot of tapes. But I meant... that totally threw me. I meant that I have I have a recorded Bible study on my website, oraclesofgod.org. Remember this? Yeah. So I have lots of Bible studies there, and one of the single subject studies covers the serpent seed. Because there is a biblical doctrine of the seed of the serpent. But you have to understand its proper context. It's not a fable about some hidden story that's not in the Bible. That's something that drives me nuts, is like there are stories that are not in the Bible that people tell about the Bible. It's okay. I mean, I don't know. I want to say, is it okay to go investigating those things? Well, I did, and certainly anyone can investigate anything they like, but I've always seen it that it corrupts people to follow after strange doctrines. It's like as if, and I look at it as the same way, honestly. Sometimes the prophecy obsession, the prophecy obsession that I see, it just exists. I know it exists. People are obsessed with prophecy. When I was young, I was fascinated with prophecy. I still am. I love the prophets. I love Revelation. I even put the whole book of Revelation into music. And I'm going to have a sip of coffee. But, I hear them talking about prophecy, and it's like they might as well be talking about fairy tales. Because of the way they, it's this constant Chicken Little alarm bells ringing. It's all, everything's happening, everything's exploding. Everything is in the midst of this massive tumultuous It's all about to break. The dam is about to break, and since I was a little kid, we've been at the precipice of the end of the world. I mean, we've been there the whole time. I'm like, how exhausting. And I think that part of the problem is why people turn to fables and commandments of men. Is because I'm going to give them credit first. It's because they haven't been taught. They haven't been taught what to do with their Christianity. Because there's far too much of this, just believe and then, sorry, just believe and now you're saved. That's not going away. I'm just going to try to ignore it. You believe and you're saved. And there's nothing more for you to do except come to church and donate. What could be more convenient for a false teacher, right? For someone greedy of filthy lucre, what could be more convenient than to tell them, just come and then be dependent on me? I don't know. Like someone is a Christian for a long time, they should be built up in the faith to the degree, Christianity is not just about saving you. It's about you being able to preach the gospel to others or fulfill whatever your role is. Not everyone can preach effectively. Everyone can preach in any, it's like prophecy. Anyone can prophesy at a given moment because the Holy Spirit can speak through any believer. Even through non-believers, the Holy Spirit can use them. The high priest is a good example when they're convicting Christ of blasphemy. He said, it is necessary that one man should die that the nation be preserved. Or that's a paraphrase, right? Basically saying that Christ would die for the sins of the people. But that's not what he meant. What he meant is if we kill him, then the Romans won't come and destroy us because they were afraid of the Messiah. At least that's how that situation came down. So, sorry. I should just end this gracefully. So anyways, the obsession with prophecy, they haven't been taught, right? And if we're taught, the Christian walk can be an exciting and it's an exciting fight and struggle that we engage in, in order to obtain something unthinkable for a human, which is the divine nature. I talk about this from 2 Peter chapter 1 all the time. We've been given all these promises that we could obtain the divine nature. And the excitement and depth of that is not communicated to people. They're told, just believe and everything's great. And I'm not saying you shouldn't believe. Sure, believe, but what do you believe? There's a lot of stuff to believe. There are many. It's not just a question of believe in Jesus and that he rose from the dead. That's a great start. But Jesus had all kinds of things to say. And he appointed apostles, and they had all kinds of things to say. And in those things are so many great and precious promises. I did a study on promises. You can find that other thing. I don't want to rely on that as a crutch to not go into it, but we are promised that we could become so much in him. We can rise above our degraded carnal nature and to approach incrementally the righteousness of God. In this life, it seems almost impossible. I understand that. But we know that when we see him, we're going to be like him. We know that in the kingdom of God, in heaven, or however you want to characterize it, it is only righteousness dwells. People know, when I get to heaven, I'll be perfect. But as you're your life there's a purpose in life. There's a purpose. We're not just here we're here and the purpose is to get saved. Just by acknowledging his existence and believing he did these things. But believing he did these things should inspire us to action. It should inspire us to curiosity. That's why I started studying with a guy like Arnold Murray, because he was satisfying my curiosity. In some ways, I feel like he used it against me. I don't think intentionally, but that doesn't matter. I want to be more mindful than that. I don't want to use your curiosity against you. I want to use your curiosity to inspire you to take action, to learn what it means to be a Christian, and then to find out how to enact that in your life. And it will give you a better life, and you will feel closer to God, and your life will have more purpose and meaning. And that is good. And you will certainly benefit from it. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining me in this study. And I look forward to studying with you again very soon.